Well, hello, Utah. I want to thank the governor for those kind words. I want to thank him for his inspiring leadership for so many years. He knows me well enough to know the introduction I prefer is a little bit shorter. I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order, and it's my joy to be here at Utah Valley University. You know, we gather at a challenging time in the life of this country. In so many ways, America is a nation in crisis. And now more than ever, we need leaders, as you're doing here at Utah Valley University, under the leadership of Dr. Astrid Tuminas and with Justin Jones at the helm. Now more than ever, we need to be training up a new generation of Americans to be instilled with knowledge, respect, and the patriotism necessary to strengthen and uphold our beloved republic. Now more than ever, we need the Gary Herbert Institute for Public Policy. And I thank you for being here to support this cause. And I'm especially honored by the dignitaries who've made time to be here. Members of the Utah House, the Utah Senate, honor us by their presence, including Senate President Stuart Adams, House Speaker Brad Wilson. Join me in thanking all the elected legislators who are here. I'm also very honored that Lieutenant Governor Deidre Henderson would be with us today. We are grateful for her leadership. And I'm especially humbled that Governor Spencer Cox and the First Lady are with us today for this important occasion. Governor, I thank you and the Lieutenant Governor for your kindness. And I always wait to introduce the highest ranking official last. She's a Marine Corps mom. She was a Christian school teacher. She's a pilot, an accomplished artist. And for the record, she was the best second lady the United States of America has ever had. Would you join me in thanking my wife, Karen Pence, for her presence here today and her service to America? But thank you all. It really is a joy to be with you. You know, as the governor mentioned, he and I became friends when I was governor of Indiana. And by that, I mean friends in the way that, you know, the Utah Jazz and the Indiana Pacers are friends. To be honest with you, the governor was elected about 4 years before me, and it didn't take me too long to figure out who Indiana's toughest competition was out there when it came to jobs and steady, strong leadership. I mean, there's always healthy competition between the governors. It's all about who has the most jobs, who has the best schools, who has the best roads. But I have to tell you, I don't know, and your governor today knows it to be true. Under the leadership of Governor Gary Herbert, Utah was always the state every other state was chasing. It's no surprise. And really, it's no surprise Gary Herbert became one of the longest-serving governors in modern American history. The Utah's population grew by nearly 500,000 people, 16% under his leadership. And I'm actually told that he went above and beyond, doing what was necessary to just stand up for Utah. He actually heroically defended Salt Lake City from a Sharknado with a tennis racket. Okay, I got to download that one. I'm going to have to look for that clip. Came to office in 2009 in the midst of the Great Recession and turned Utah's economy around faster than almost any other state. Personal income growth rate of 7%, second highest in the nation. Median household incomes in the state of Utah grew by 20%. You know, the Bible says if you owe debts, pay debts. If honor, then honor. If respect, then respect. And I simply want to express a debt of honor and gratitude to a man whose faith in God, love for his family, and servant leadership served this state so well and inspired all of us that had the opportunity to serve America during his tenure. Join me in thanking an American statesman one more time, Governor Gary Herbert. But it's good to be with you all, it really is. And, my life has changed a lot since we were last together. Karen and I moved back to Indiana. We bought 5 acres and a pond. I got a John Deere riding mower, 54-inch deck, 0-turn radius, 25 horsepower. Pretty serious stuff. And one of the great things about no longer being vice president is you get to drive your own car. One of the bad parts is you get to pay for your own gas. And the biggest deal for us is that our son and wonderful daughter-in-law, who are currently stationed at Marine Corps Base Yuma in Arizona, gave us our first grandchild. Avery Grace is 1.5 years. We have 2 more on the way, which means that come this spring, Lord willing, I'm going to be telling my kids the bases are loaded, somebody needs to drive in a run. But Karen and I learned in the last 1.5 years, we actually had kids just to have grandkids. Been an incredible blessing. Our lives have changed a lot. And the truth is, times have changed for all of us. In many ways, America today is almost unrecognizable from the days before the worst pandemic in 100 years struck our country. And today, America continues to reel from the aftermath of the COVID pandemic. We're struggling with inflation at a 40-year high, gas prices still through the roof, crime besetting most of our major cities. Borders are under siege, national debt is piling up. And worst of all, this is a crisis that strikes at the very heart of our civilization because it includes the erosion of the nuclear family, marked by declining marriage rates, rising divorce, plummeting birth rates, and the proliferation of an extreme ideology that Americans came to understand even more during the COVID pandemic when the kids were studying on a laptop in the kitchen. An ideology that's affected our schools at every level, colleges and workplace, and our culture. The truth is, the people of Utah know more than most. Strong families make for strong communities, and strong communities make for a strong America. For our civilization to prosper, for our nation to achieve our greatest potential, if we're to pass on the rights and freedoms and values we cherish for the next generation, our highest priority in America today should be to preserve, renew, and strengthen American families. America must put families first once again. And I want to talk to you about how we do that today, because I think that the ideals upon which the Herbert Institute have been founded, the ideals upon which this nation was founded, that'll be taught in this institute in the years and the decades ahead, are the very hope for the country. From the American founding, our nation was built on the notion that ideas have consequences. America is bigger than any one moment, any one election, any one party, any one person. It's always been about ideas. And the most unprecedented in human history is the idea from the American founding that we are, all of us, endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. In short order, that every one of us is endowed by our Creator with a natural birthright of freedom. And I must tell you, it was a great privilege for me to serve as your vice president for 4 years, and I want to thank the people of Utah for your support and your prayers during the time of our service. And I'm proud to say under the Trump-Pence administration, we moved an agenda built on that principle of freedom every single day. The principles of limited government enshrined in our Constitution. And I believe we demonstrated in those first 3 years that freedom works. We achieved the lowest unemployment, the highest household income, the most pro-American trade deals, the most secure border, and we made the most powerful military in the history of the world, stronger than ever before. But I came here today not to look backwards, but to look forward. Because in these challenging times, now more than ever, we ought to focus on what works. And freedom works. And in these challenging days, I believe it's to freedom that all of us as Americans should repair. And it's to freedom that this rising generation should look and champion in the days ahead. And it's that vision of freedom that I think has always animated the life of our nation. You know, the Bible tells us where there is no vision, the people perish. And what's true of a people is also true of nations in which they live. And the vision for America has always been a vision of freedom and equality of opportunity. I truly do believe that here in the year 2022 and in the years that follow, the American people have an opportunity to restore our national unity, to rebuild the bonds that unite us and renew the promise of every American of every race and creed and color if we build on a foundation of freedom. And that means those of us in public life must do more than just criticize. We must unite around a bold, optimistic agenda that's grounded in the highest ideals of this country. You know, it was in that spirit, as Governor Herbert was founding this institute, that I created a group in Washington, D.C. called Advancing American Freedom. We pulled together some of the 50 brightest stars of the conservative movement, many former cabinet members of our administration, many senior officials, and we posed a singular question. We asked them to answer the question of what were the ideas that animated the conservative movement, literally from Ronald Reagan to Donald Trump. Because while there were great and significant personalities all along the way, all during the years that I've been involved in and around public life, I believe that it's been an ideas movement. We collected them all in one place, and if you lose interest in my speech, you can go to your phone and go to Advancing American Freedom and see all of it. We call it a freedom agenda. It contains solutions that are designed to be implemented not just by the federal government, not just by an administration, but at the state and local level, and also ideas that ought to be embraced and advocated by the American people. You know, I served in Congress for 12 years, as the governor shared. And it's often been said that Congress only does two things well: nothing and overreact. And so we can't just look to the Congress. We can't just look to Washington, D.C. One of the things that brought Gary Herbert and I together so well was because of our experience as governors. We knew, as Ronald Reagan said memorably in his first inaugural address, that the states created the federal government. The federal government didn't create the states. And to have a freedom agenda going forward, we need to advance the cause of freedom at the state level in every state in America. And Utah is emblematic of that agenda. And I know in so many ways that I'm preaching to the choir in Utah, but I'm privileged and honored to do it. Our freedom agenda actually began with a focus on American culture. You know, there's a saying that Politics is downstream from culture. And I would submit if we continue to allow the angry, radical voices on the extremes to keep dumping toxic waste into the headwaters of culture, our politics will only get more poisonous over time. The culture we seek to preserve is the one that's been handed down for generations. It's one that cherishes the rights and freedoms of every American. First and foremost in our agenda, I believe, to preserve American culture, we must restore the principle that we are a nation that cherishes every human life, born and unborn. I stand before you today humbled and with a grateful heart, thanks to the conservative Supreme Court majority that was forged in large part during our administration. After 50 years, 50 years of heartbreak, 50 years of lives of incalculable value ended before they were born. Today, at long last, Roe versus Wade has been sent to the ash heap of history where it belongs, and the American people have been given a new beginning for life. To strengthen our culture, I believe first and foremost, we must not rest or relent until the sanctity of life is restored to the center of American law in every state in the land. Further, to advance and preserve American culture, we need to defend our first freedom without apology, and that is the freedom of religion of every American to live, to work, to worship according to the dictates of their conscience. We live in a time of increasing hostility toward people that hold traditional religious beliefs. I spoke recently at another university, Liberty University in Virginia, and I spoke of what I call the intolerance of tolerance. We live in a day and age when in the name of tolerance, we encounter some of the least tolerant rhetoric in America. We need to be in America where people have the right to live out their faith and to speak their faith and their values in the public square. We have to defend the freedom of religion and the freedom of speech of every American in the courts and in the public square. Beyond that, defending our culture means recognizing that a nation without borders is not a nation. Seeing a crisis at our southern border, 2 million people coming across our border, just this week reported in this past year. We need to rededicate ourselves to secure our border and fix this broken immigration system once and for all. It's not a new issue for me. In 2006, as a member of Congress, as the leader of the House Conservative Caucus, I authored a no amnesty immigration reform proposal with a conservative senator from Texas named Kay Bailey Hutchison. Now, I remember sitting in the Oval Office, Gary. President Bush invited me in, and he wanted to hear about the proposal that was starting to catch some steam. It involved securing the border, enforcing the laws, but then it created a no amnesty guest worker program operated by the private sector. I still believe it's an idea whose time will come. But President Bush in the Oval Office sat me down. I was on one of those couches. He was on one of the hardback chairs. The vice president was there. His team was there. And after we spent about an hour talking through that proposal, he looked at me and he said, "You mind if I ask you a personal question?" I said, "Mr. President, it's your office. I mean, Ask me whatever you want. And he said, well, I noticed you're not exactly from a border state. I kind of wondered why you got into this thing. And I looked at him and I said, well, probably September 1923 had a lot to do with it. And he said, okay, I'll bite. And I said, well, it was in September of 1923 that a 20-year-old Irishman named Richard Michael Cawley stepped off on a boat onto Ellis Island. He rode a train to Chicago, Illinois, drove a bus for 40 years, raised a precocious redhead who went down to a small town in Columbus and had 4 boys and a girl. And I said, Richard Michael Cawley is why Michael Richard Pence came to the Oval Office to see the President of the United States. The President looked at me and he said, you get it, don't you? He said, we're a nation of immigrants. I said, Mr. President, I don't just get it. I've lived it. And I can still hear that Irishman's brogue ringing in my heart. Let me tell you, men and women of Utah, we can secure our border. We can enforce our law. We did it in our administration when we reduced illegal immigration by 90%. But we have an obligation as Americans to fix this broken immigration system so it works for Americans and for those who desire to come here under the law and live the American dream, just like my grandfather and my family has. I believe education is essential to the thriving of our culture. We need to restore patriotic education to our classrooms. Teach our children the history of this country, but teach them to love our country. Help them understand that we are not a perfect union, but we are maybe the only nation on earth that has strived and become a more perfect union in all the years of our nation's life. I believe the time has come to let every parent choose where their children go to school, whether it's public, private, parochial, or homeschool. So there's much to do in the subject of the culture, but the second category is on the economy. To restore American freedom, we must revive the American economy through free market principles. We must unleash free enterprise in the strongest economy in the history of the world. You know, the free enterprise system is the most powerful economic engine in the history of mankind. No system has created more wealth, lifted more people out of poverty, or improved the quality of life for more people to a greater degree. And we know how to fix the economy. Just how Governor Gary Herbert did it, how you all have done it here in Utah, how we did it during the 4 years of the Trump-Pence administration. You let the American people keep more of what they earn. You lower taxes on American businesses so they can compete with businesses around the world. They're able to bring jobs back to America. Then you unleash American energy, roll back red tape, take 3 steps back, and the American economy will boom again, just as it did before. In our administration, in those first 3 years, 7 million new jobs, unemployment plummeted to its lowest rate ever, 10 million people lifted off of welfare. That may be most meaningful to me. The unemployment rates for African and Americans and Hispanic Americans were the lowest ever recorded in American history. The American dream was working for every American. Finally, to restore American freedom, the foundations of our freedom, we must renew American leadership on the world stage. As Russia continues its unconscionable war of aggression in Ukraine, and as China has continued to grow even more aggressive, trampling human rights, committing trade abuses, menacing Taiwan, military maneuvers in the South China Sea, now more than ever, we need to project American strength. You know, Karen and I are not just grandparents, but we're the proud parents of a captain in the United States Marine Corps. Thank you. And my unworthy son-in-law is a pilot for the United States Navy. So, you know, the U.S. military is the greatest force for good the world has ever known. In fact, can I just take a second? I just met some wonderful new enrollees in the ROTC program here at Utah Valley, and I thank them for stepping up to serve their country. But can I ask, if you're able, every man and woman that has worn the uniform of the United States, would you mind just standing up and letting us show our thanks to you one more time for defending our freedom? Thank you for our freedom. You know, America learned years ago that peace comes through strength. John Quincy Adams said famously that America should never, quote, go abroad in search of monsters to destroy. And we never have, but we need to be prepared. We must stand strong in the great power competition with the Chinese Communist Party and a resurgent Russia, with a military fit for the task. That means, in practical terms, redoubling our investment in readiness and modernization. It means ending the focus at the Pentagon on political indoctrination over preparedness of our military, and it means giving our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guard, and Space Force the resources that they need to be as dominant on earth and sky and sea and space as America has ever been. So that's the roadmap. I recommend it to your attention. I commend it to the Herbert Institute for their consideration. I hope it provides a clear roadmap for conservative leaders and every American, frankly, regardless of their political party, regardless of their political philosophy, to see the seeds of a movement that I think expresses the collective aspiration of the American people. After serving as your vice president, traveling all across this country, meeting Americans in big cities and small towns, I remain convinced that beyond politics, Americans want a nation of more opportunity for all. They want to restore American leadership in the world. And the American people are proud of our traditional American culture and want to see it strengthened and preserved. The truth is, I hope it's a vision for having government as good as our people, because this is a great nation and a great people. I can testify firsthand. But freedom doesn't just happen. Governor Herbert reminded me last night of what President Reagan used to say. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It's not passed along in the bloodstream. It has to be fought for and defended by each succeeding generation. And so the cause that I describe here is not a new one. It's one that every American generation has shouldered before. But in some ways, it seems more urgent at home to defend freedom than any time in my lifetime. And so I want to say to the rising generation here at Utah Valley University, the bright young people who join us here, you must prepare your minds for action. Recognize that your generation may be the last line of defense for a free and society in America grounded in the principles of our Constitution. For most of our history, both political parties were committed to the ideals enshrined in our founding documents, but sadly, that's no longer the case. The truth is, as we gather here today, there are voices in America that routinely demean the American founding. Today, many in Washington seek to rewrite our Constitution, trample religious liberty, cancel free speech, redefine the liberties enshrined in our Bill of Rights. You know, every office holder in this country takes the same oath of office: to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And it ends with a prayer: so help me God. In swearing that oath, you commit yourself to an agenda of freedom, to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. What I say to this rising generation is you need to prepare yourself. Whether you take that oath to serve in office at the local, state, or federal level, well, someday you take that oath in the uniform of the United States, or as a public safety officer somewhere here in Utah, or you just cherish the freedoms enshrined in those founding documents. I want you to prepare yourself to keep that oath. You know, there's a misnomer out in society today that adversity creates character. The way my kids say it is, whatever doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Well, I have a different view. Whatever doesn't kill you just didn't kill you. Adversity doesn't create character. Adversity reveals character. When the hard times come, when your values and your ideals are pressed, you will be in that moment the man or woman you've been preparing to be in every quiet moment before. And let me say to all, cherish freedom. And all who desire to serve, let you be known as a person who will keep your oath. As the Bible says, you'll keep your oath even when it hurts. To do that, I want to challenge the students who join us here today to make a lifelong commitment to become men and women of integrity. Use this time in your life to develop the qualities of the inner man and the inner woman that will pour a foundation of strength and character that will allow you to meet that moment. Never forget that the foundation of America is freedom, but the foundation of freedom is faith. And as you learn and study the principles that have created this freest and most prosperous and most powerful nation in the history of the world, I encourage you to take time in your life to study those foundations, to understand that this shining city on a hill was founded by people who came here for faith. This state itself has a rich history of religious liberty. And I truly do believe that if we will turn our heart to Him, if we will claim those ancient words that have been over the mantle in our home for decades, and I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future, that on a foundation of faith and freedom, that the best days for the greatest nation on earth are yet to come. So help us God. Thank you all very much.